Hello, this is Keith with another fantastic Star Trek review. How are you doing today? Today I'm going to be reviewing Star Trek Voyager, the last episode, Endgame. Well, let's just say I watched this episode recently. I've been watching it. I've watched it several times over the last week or so. And this is probably one of the first times I've watched it in the 7 years ago since it premiered. I mean, the last episode showed, I want to say, May something in 2001. So it's been about 7 years since it aired. I watched it that first night it aired. And I thought it was okay then. I had some problems with it. I'm going to go into some of the problems I had with it right now. For one, the very first scene is you find out Voyager gets home. Like, it took them a long time, but you find out they got home, and I mean, that's good. But I mean, it kind of takes some of the climax out of it. They got home and everything's fine, but then they spend the next 20 minutes, I'd want to say, showing what happened after they got home. And which, as we all know, I mean, spoiler warning, if you haven't seen the episode, quit watching. I mean, you find out that all this stuff that happened since they got home ends up not happening. Because why? Because of my second problem with the episode. Admiral Janeway decides to break the temporal prime directive to get their crew home. Basically, that just means everything you just saw in the first however many minutes of the episode, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't happen. It's been erased from the timeline. So, I mean, all those trivial things like Tom becoming a holodeck author and the Doctor picking a name, all of that, gone. Even his wife, forget it. Doesn't happen. And, I mean, yeah, that's my second problem, is her breaking the temporal prime directive. You don't know what's going to happen when you break the temporal prime directive. I mean, even if you don't phrase it so eloquently. I mean, if you just go back in time and alter the timeline in some way, she doesn't know what's going to happen. For all she knows, with her plan, if she goes back and gets Voyager home early, I mean, she went back to a couple days or even a day or two before Tom and B'Elanna's baby was born. What's her name? Muriel Paris, I think. She was the one who helped orchestrate this plan to help Admiral Janeway go back in time. For all she knows, the baby ends up dying. Maybe B'Elanna will die shortly after she travels back in time and changes the timeline. Maybe after she steers them back into the nebula, the Borg end up doing so, even if they don't destroy Voyager and she gets them home okay, maybe B'Elanna's gonna die and then the baby's not gonna be born, and she was trying to protect Chakotay in 7 of 9. Maybe they end up dying anyway. Who knows? My whole point is that there could be more disastrous consequences from changing the timeline than there would be if you just left it alone. I mean, changing the timeline has time and time again shown to be a bad idea. And then my third problem with the episode, I'd have to say, was what a lot of people's problem with it is. They get home like in the last minute of the episode. The very last minute. They get home. They're in the Alpha Quadrant. They're greeted by all these ships. It was a really nice shot, I'll admit. Oh, all these Starfleet ships, and and then Janeway. A very, very touching last moment where Janeway says, "Plot a course for home," or "Set a course for home," or something like that. And then you see Earth. Voyager heading toward Earth in the last shot. Okay, that's all fine and good. But they get there, but that's the last shot. You don't get to see what happens to any of them after they get home. You get to see what happens to them after they get home in the beginning of the episode, but all of that's a moot point now. You don't get that. None of that happened. So really, you don't have any idea what happened. The only thing you know that happened after Voyager, Janeway becomes an admiral. You only know that because of Nemesis. And that's all you really know. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some of the things I liked about the episode. Now, remember I was complaining before about Janeway breaking the temporal prime directive and all that stuff? Well, that I'm going to say is one of my favorite things about the episode. She did break the temporal prime directive. It's kind of a contradiction. Yeah, there were many problems, and any rational person would not want to break the temporal prime directive, but she did, which means that even after she got home, she never gave up on her crew. She's like, okay, yeah, I got them home in 30 years, or no, it was like 23 years or something like that. And she's like, that can't be the best I can do. She's been plotting ever since she got home to try to find a way to get her crew home even sooner. She never gave up on them. Damn the rules, damn the prime directive, which really kind of ties up a loose end. In the very first episode in Caretaker, I always felt she broke the main prime directive by helping the Ocampa and destroying the Caretaker's array. She basically shifted the whole balance of power in the Delta Quadrant and able to help the species that wasn't a part of the Federation, hadn't really requested their help. And she ended up stranding her crew in the Delta Quadrant to literally shift the balance of power and to help out a primitive race. I always thought that was a blatant violation of the Prime Directive. She should have just used the Caretaker's array, gotten home, and if the Kazon took over the Acampa because the array was still there, well, that's really none of her concern. Yeah, it sucks. It's really not fair, but she did it. But that's what I think that's what Starfleet would have called for. She didn't do that. She decided to go against the Prime Directive for the betterment of humanity. And I think I think Endgame extends that further. She doesn't care about the Prime Directive. Starfleet's orders and regulations, while important, are only secondary to the greater good. And she decided to break them in order to do what she felt was best for her crew and get them home sooner. I always liked that. And the other thing I liked about this episode, come on, even though a lot of people complain that they use the Borg again, it was great. How cool was it to see the Borg? I mean, they pretty much knew this was going to be the last episode in the 24th century, and I think this was the first time that you ever felt like they dealt a crippling blow to the Borg. I mean, yeah, in other episodes you got to see them destroying like cubes and spheres. I mean, they did, they destroyed ships even in the Next Generation. They did some damage. This is the first time you ever felt like they finally dealt a devastating blow to one of the Federation's greatest enemies in the 24th century. I mean, you got to see a whole Unimatrix blow up. I don't think the Borg are gone from the timeline after that, but they finally, one of the Federation's greatest enemies had a crippling blow dealt to them. And I think that was kind of important for them to show, especially in Voyager, where the Borg were a very large part of the series. And there were some other things I liked about this episode. I thought the effects in the last episode were a lot better than they had been this. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just comparing it to, I don't know. But I mean, I just watched the episode, recently, like in the last couple days, and the effects held up. I mean, this was 7 years ago, which means that 7 years ago this episode aired. I mean, for comparatively speaking, the last episode of Next Generation had aired 7 years prior to that, which means I'm right now 7 years away. When that episode aired was the same amount of time as when All Good Things aired. I think the effects from the last episode of Voyager have held up better, and they just seem better than they were throughout most of the series. So the effects were good. The story, while not a great story overall, was entertaining. A lot like Voyager. It was almost standalone. You don't really need to know anything other than the main premise. It was just, I thought it was a fitting end to the series. Not overly complex, but entertaining and consistent. And I liked it. I think if I'm going to give this a rating, I'm going to give it 7.8 warp. I'm going to give it a warp rating of 7.8. I think everybody should check it out. It wasn't the best episode of Voyager. I think it was the second best finale of any Trek series. I think All Good Things was probably the best finale to any series. I think All Good Things was second. No, wait, hold on. All Good Things was one. Endgame was second. And then probably What You Leave Behind. And then, I guess, Turnabout Intruder. I don't know. I thought it was better than these other Voyages. The other Voyages are obviously last. But anyway, everybody, 7.8. Check it out. Have a good day.